We all want to play games in training to try and develop fitness and the style of play we have, ideally making the most of the time we have available in our training and bring as many things along together. But can the different types of games we play develop specific aspects of fit, like speed, endurance, turning, change direction, agility, whatever we're trying to target? And if we try and target things specifically in terms of fitness, will they have knock-on impacts on the style of game we're playing, the skills we want to develop, or how we execute those skills? I'm going to dig into this paper here by Shane Mangan from 2019, where we see how we can develop the physical alongside the technical and tactical and what knock-on impacts they both have on each other, so we're better aware of what comes along at the same time, but also ensuring what we might want to target physically doesn't have a negative impact on anything skill-based or goes against our specific style of play in terms of tactics. General overview of this study involved 34 adult club players, and they're all involved in a series of 4v4 games on 3 different pitch sizes: 40 metres by 20 metres, 60 metres by 20 metres and 80 metres by 20 metres. They were all played with 4 goals or gates at each end, and to score you ran a ball through one of the gates, then if you'd scored you maintain possession and you swing back around and try and score back up the opposite end. Each game was played for 4 minutes with 4 minutes active recovery. I'm going to guess that active recovery was isolated skill work, but I can't be certain. You can see the layout of the different pitches on screen here now, and they may be useful in terms of how you design stuff from this or experiment with some of the examples once we go into a few more details on what you're specifically trying to target. In terms of what was measured, there were 312 different observations recorded from players over the course of the study. And for reporting, I'm going to break that into 2 different categories: the physical outputs from GPS and then the more technical tactical outcomes that are come from coding the game through a stats analysis package. GPS largely looked at the total distance covered, the high speed distance covered, the sprints distance, a number of sprints, accels and decelerations, or overall change of direction or impact in terms of turning. When it comes to more technical and tactical outputs, they were videoed and encoded by hand, and they largely looked at hand passes, kick passes, successful versus unsuccessful passes, tackles or tackle attempts, scores, and a few other bits. You can see the full range of what was investigated and coded here now. There's a list of variables down the left hand side, but more importantly a specific definition of each one. So if you're looking to replicate this in any way, you can try and use the same definitions, particularly if you want to apply it across the hurling, or do it on varying pitch sizes compared to what was done here, or I'd even suggest maybe do it on some slightly different scoring outcomes, and sometimes that can have a different impact on the game, particularly if you want to include some aspects around the new rules or other skills you want to emphasise. That'll make more sense as we go through and look at some of the key findings. Having gone through the paper, there were 7 key things that became important to me having looked at the various outputs from this. I'm going to look at these through 7 lessons learned to see how they're impacting what I'm designing for training my teams, and you can apply across to what you're doing with yours as well. So number 1, pitch size changes everything. Not just a couple of outcomes, but the majority of things within that game, just in different ways. The different pitch sizes, they give quite different results. So how much the players run, how fast they move when they are running, and how they use the ball all depend on the amount of space that is available to them. Bear in mind, because the pitches got bigger, but they were all 4v4 games, there is more space each time you play. If you were to scale the number of players up with the pitch size, like say going from 40 by 20 to 80 by 20, but you increase from 4v4 to 6v6, that may also have a change on impact, and that's worth exploring if you want to try some of these yourself. The key is to use these findings to shape the session you want and the intended outcomes you want to get from the session. Second lesson, and getting a little bit more specific here, the 60 by 20 metre pitch was the best for getting high speed running, or what is as close as possible to sprinting. So players covered the most high speed running distance, the most sprint distance, and completed the most sprints on a 60 by 20 pitch. They got more sprint distance in both the smaller and the bigger pitch, despite you thinking they may actually cover more in the bigger pitch, but we'll look at that in a bit more detail as we go on further. So if you want to build sprint volume and increase your high speed running distance, then the 60 by 20 metre pitch is the best one for targeting that. Number 3, the 40 by 20 metre pitch was the best for tackles and pressure. And while we don't want to just look at the physical output here in terms of the tackles, it does also force more decision making under pressure and quicker decisions to be made if you want to make them more successful. So there's greater involvement. It's not just there are more tackles and turnovers, there's a greater involvement in tackles and turnovers on a smaller pitch. But that makes sense. There's less space, players are closer together, so it's going to force more of those outcomes. They're also going to produce more short bursts of high intensity effort. These are going to be your accelerations, decelerations, turns, because ultimately if you look to open up a bit of speed, there's an end line there in front of you that's forcing you to stop and turn and come back the other way, or just because you have less places to hide, there are more players there in front of you to get in a tackle or to shove you in some form of different direction. The tight space also forces faster decisions and closer contact, therefore protecting the ball in contact, making tackles, but you would also hope for some more discipline in tackles to knock your fouls away. Number 4, the 80 by 20 metre pitch has more running, but majority of it came at a lower intensity. Now this lower intensity is relative here. It's still quite high intensity running as we look at in a minute, but relative to the 40 by 20 and the 60 by 20 metre pitches, it is at a relative lower intensity. Players will cover more ground overall, but it's not at the same high speeds. It's more of a constant movement, so it's just not physically possible to do it all at really high speed, like constant high speed running, dipping a few sprints in there as well. The ball stays in play for longer, so you're maintaining possession for longer, you're building phases of attack, but it's done at a slower pace. This then can be used, particularly if you want to focus more on the gameplay side of things, to encourage greater possession play and to build more structured attacks. Now like I said, this was done in 2019, or published in 2019, probably done before that, so it was before the new rules came in. If you look to tweak it to include those in some way, that can have an impact, particularly on games on this particular size pitch. Number 5, and one of the more important ones, all small-sided games are good fitness tools. It's just about adapting them for the specific fitness outcomes you want to get. So like the players hit 85% of their heart rate max across all the pitch sizes. If you're looking to get a bump in aerobic fitness, you're generally looking for 80 to 85% plus and maintain that for somewhat of a prolonged period. And based on how high intensity you go, that'll often determine how long you do things at, whether that be in a game or in isolated conditioning. So whether it's a small or large or medium sized game, there are going to be aerobic developments in those. It's just about some of the more specifics that you want to target, whether it be high speed running, sprints and turns, or just general gameplay specific stuff like phases of play, defensive discipline, transition, anything that way. If you're accumulating enough overall volume, you have enough players to do it and you can structure it out without having a negative impact on the style of play you want, you can get an awful lot, if not the majority of your training through games and not really have a need for any isolated running. I would caveat that with, you probably still do need to do some isolated speed work, and that was alluded to in a recent video I did with Philip Connors, which you can check linked up here or somewhere down below. Number 6, and this is really getting into some of the technical stuff here, but hand passing will tend to dominate unless you intervene with some form of constraint or rule. Sometimes general encouragement here, but you will often need to constrain the game in a specific way to encourage the skills that you want to get out of it. So players generally hand passed regardless of the pitch size. Now a 40 by 20 pitch, it's going to be very difficult with that many players on you covering that distance to use a kick pass anyway. But I was a little surprised when I saw the 80 by 20 metre pitch still had majority hand passes there. I think now with our different marks, our 3-up strategy, the quicker transitions that are required, or potentially even in a game like this, playing 3v3 with 1 up or having to leave 1 back, that may also encourage more kick passing once there is a target up there. You need to build it in some way to the rules, like I just outlined there with having specific zones or suggesting, and I don't generally like stuff like this. Once there's 3 hand passes, you have to make a kick pass, because that can make it a bit contrived, or also sometimes we'll make a kick pass when it's not remotely on. They should be using a hand pass in that situation. But there are requirements around tweaking some of the conditions to get a kick and focus, and let that be on the longer pitch, go 3 up, 3 back, and to cross that transition line, a kick is required, or have 2 end zones where you leave a 1v1 up there. It's up to you based on the style of play you want to develop. 7th lesson then is to match the pitch to your coach and goal, both physically, technically and tactically. If you want speed, sprints, high speed running, then the 60 by 20 is best for that. Focus on a physical output. If you want a bit more pressure, chaos, high intensity tackling, decision making under pressure, then 40 by 20 is going to be the best one here. If you want longer ball and play times, maybe more of a focus on possession or endurance, or both of those combined, then your 80 by 20 metre pitch is going to be best. To go a little bit further than those, if there's more specific aspects play, like kicking, you might use 80 by 20. You might bump it up to 5v5 with specific zones. Realistically, it's going to be important to rotate the different pitch sizes you use and the specific constraints within those to get the adaptations you want over the course of the season, over the course of a training week, and even potentially over the course of a specific session to build through or include specific outcomes that you want. To finish off and look at some practical implications, or to give brief summaries around the 3 different pitch sizes we've looked at here, we're going to see that on a 40 metre by 20 metre pitch, it's generally best for getting high energy bursts, some fast decision making, including more tackles, some passing under pressure or decision making under pressure, defensive pressure to try and build that, and more changes of direction. When it comes to our 60 metre by 20 metre pitch, we're going to get more high speed running, we're going to get more total sprints and more sprint volume. It's probably going to be the closest to match your game like speed, or play somewhat close to the same pace or intensity matches are played at, so specific conditioning. And it's also generally going to, because of all those things included, have more faster transitions as you move the ball from one end of the field to the other. And finally, some summary points on our 80 metres by 20 metre pitch. It's generally going to develop endurance at some form of a lower intensity, although we saw it's still bringing up heart rate 85% or above of your maximum. It's going to include more longer passages of play or maintaining possession for longer periods of time. That's going to help with your ball retention and building up phases of play or building up different attacks, which, because if the opposition team has more possession, that's also going to try and require greater defensive discipline or discipline in defence to hold your line, to mark your men, to mark your zone, whatever your specific defensive setup is. If you found this useful, then you can get my game-based conditioning guide in the description below, and you can watch this video up here to get more information around designing games for your sessions.